Welcome to the Communities of Character podcast. I'm Jennifer Hogan, former high school principal and now senior character coach at Hope Institute. Today's guest is someone our listeners already know and deeply respect, Dr. Greg Moore. Greg first joined us in 2023, and that conversation quickly became one of the most listened to episodes, and for good reason. I think that's because his leadership story and his unwavering commitment to character resonated with educators across the country. At the time, Dr. Moore was serving as principal of Springville High School, where he helped to build a culture rooted in belonging, accountability, and shared purpose. His leadership demonstrated that when character becomes part of the daily life of a school, it changes how people show up for themselves and for one another. And since that conversation, Dr. Moore has stepped into a new role as principal of Auburn High School, one of the largest high schools in Alabama. That transition has given him the opportunity to do something many leaders face at some point in their careers: start over in a new community, build trust, and establish a culture rooted in character from the ground up. And what makes Greg's leadership so compelling is that character isn't something he talks about occasionally. It's the foundation of every decision he makes, every relationship he builds, and every culture he helps to shape. In today's conversation, we're exploring what it looks like to bring character into a new environment, the lessons he's learned along the way, and what leaders everywhere can take from his experience as they work to build cultures where both students and adults can thrive. We're honored to welcome Dr. Greg Moore back to the Communities of Character podcast. Greg, welcome back. We are so glad that you're here.
I'm so excited to be here. Glad to be back and have a chance to share again on the Characters Community Podcast, Communities of Character Podcast.
Yeah, we are looking forward to this conversation so much.
So let's start with something real. Okay, Greg, you left Springville after building something meaningful, a strong culture, deep relationships, and trust. And that's not easy to walk away from. And when you stepped into Auburn as the new principal, talk to us. What did that feel like emotionally?
The emotion started when it became reality that I was leaving Springville, Alabama. You know, that culture started not just 5 years ago at Springville High School, but you remember I was a principal at Springville Elementary first. So those, fifth, fourth, and third graders that came to me in the high school, that culture was a long time. 8 years seeing and impacting a community was the emotion within itself of the reality that I was leaving. Then arriving to Auburn High School, I've told people I felt like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when I pulled up and saw how large the campus was and the things that I was about to entail. Just some excitement, but a lot of just anxious. Never fear, but just real. Just a little anxious as to how things would go and how things would function. How much learning the curve it would be, just because there was so many more things happening at one time. So the emotions were tough. And can you imagine your first day at Auburn High School as principal and you're not in Springville, Alabama anymore? And when we had the first class change and 2,000 kids moved at one time, I knew I was not in Springville, Alabama anymore. So, but over time, those emotions, you begin to embrace your opportunity. You understand that you're fulfilling an assignment greater than yourself, and you just dive in. So it's been one of the greatest experiences that I could have ever imagined when even given this opportunity.
That's awesome. And I know leaving Springville was very hard because you didn't invest just professionally, but personally. You were there a long time. I see your pictures on social media, the kids that you had in elementary school. You saw them grow up and they became students at your high school, and which is really incredible, and what an opportunity. But to hear you speak about going to a new place and facing new challenges with gratitude, I mean, it reveals a lot about your character, which I'm really excited to have you back on the podcast so that we can talk about that and that new journey that you're taking.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing is I get to Auburn, Alabama, and I have 3 seniors who were my first fourth graders at Springville Elementary who've moved to Auburn. So they're excited because I get to give them their diploma. So how crazy is that?
That's awesome.
Just full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those little nuggets are awesome, aren't they?
Yes,
Those little
yes,
nuggets that keep us
yes,
going. When you
yes.
mentioned this as folks who've been at really big high schools in the state of Alabama, which Jennifer and I both have,
Mm-hmm.
you walk into Auburn High School, which is an established, very high-performing school with its own traditions and own identity, and when you enter a place like that, there's naturally a tension. You wanna lead, but you also don't wanna disrupt what's working, so
Mhm.
I'm curious, what did you intentionally prioritize in those first few months? And what did you intentionally not rush into as you started that transition?
Well, what we do in our desire to embrace character education and character and people, I felt like that needed to be a part of my priority, but it was not something that I had to realize that this is year one at Auburn. This is not year five Springville. This
Mm,
is year one. So you can't come in expecting them to be at a place where you expect them to be as if you were in your old school. So you
mm,
had to kind of start lay a groundwork of foundation. So then that priority for me was we all can strive to be good people. That's
mm,
the same mantra, I've had from where I had left, even in Springville was, Auburn is a large school with students doing a variety of things from service organizations to athletics to arts, very well in academics. But guys, there's one thing that we can have in common, and that's just being a good person. So I made that a priority of guys. We're all gonna have one thing in common and have a foundation. Everything we do in Auburn is gonna be built on the fact that we're striving to be good people. And if you
mm,
do that, you can sustain success because you're trying to do things the right way. So that was something I prioritized. One thing I did not prioritize was and all by the time I left Springwell, Tiger Coat was something everywhere, but when I arrived here, that was not something that I put into place as you guys, this is what we're going to do. This is this. That was not the approach at all. Everything was just, let's just be good people and let's build on that. And then everything else that I might have seen we might want to question or ask why or change, it's not the time. So, you just embrace the things in which we were doing. This is still an observation year as far as that first semester and this semester. So a lot of things I've learned just by being able to be a part of it, ask questions, and then you'll be looking to make some adjustments as we go. But, a priority for me is we can all be a good people. Like that's priority. Like we can treat each other with respect, treat people how you want to be treated, and then things like that, we can build upon. But if you're not doing that thing and having a foundation of that, anything you try to achieve is hard to be sustainable over time because it's not built on a solid foundation.
I love that. I love just the thought process of let's take care of who we are first and the
Mhm.
rest of it we can pause and I love as a leader that you pause and listen and you mentioned asking good questions like what a
Mhm.
great way to lead but really that reflection of like who we are matters first and we can go from there and build what we need to build.
And character has always been foundational to your leadership, Greg. And character education's not just a template. At Hope
Mhm.
Institute, we teach it is the plate upon which everything else resides. And
Mhm.
we don't have a set curriculum, we don't have a set program, we don't have that template to follow. So going into Auburn, how do you bring that character-centered leadership without recreating Springville? How do you cast that vision and make sure that that is the plate there at Auburn too?
I think first and foremost, I often tell people you can convince people with your words, but you're going to win them and lose them with your actions and your work.
Mm.
So first and foremost, to build it, you had to build from within. Everything that I wanted to see out of others, they needed to see out of me first. Um, you know, for me, when you talk about a plate and character is the plate for who we are at Auburn High School, once again, it's the daily actions and activities that bring about who we are as far as our character centered approach. There's a lot of various things, like you mentioned about Hope Institute, or, various things Auburn here. So some schools do what's called capturing kids' hearts. Those are all programs and things that are great. But if you can't take those things and apply them to your life and who we are as people, then all we're doing is going over information. But it has to have life to it. And here at Auburn High School, that's one thing that I feel I've brought in a character approach is it's not about what we're saying or what we're showing, it's how we're living. And I've been that way everywhere I've gone since I've embraced a character approach is we will live it. We don't want to be a school that talks about it. We want to be a school that walks it out every day. And I think that's becoming a part of the everyday approach here, that students are becoming a part of understanding that this is not something he's only talked about from day one and kind of stopped. Because they want to see how consistent you're going to be. Is this something that's real? Because if it's real to you, it's every day. It's not something I just talked about when I first arrived and expected to see. No, I'm walking it. I'm in the hallways. I'm checking. I am inspecting what I'm expecting every day. I need to see it in you because it's not about what we say. It's about who we are, and that we are the plate. We're walking plates because we want to live it. We want to live it, and I think some people are starting to embrace that because they see it in me every day.
Our actions are so important. And when you talk about living it and modeling it, we know that the leader is so important. And I just appreciate all that you shared about, living it, breathing it, and modeling all that for people at your school.
Well, and really the next question is kind of a follow-up to that. Like you've mentioned that we are the plate, right? That we do live that out. So there's a moment, and probably moments as a new principal when you step into a new school, where people are always watching, and they're watching you walk the halls, they're watching how you handle stress. Before you ever really articulate anything, before you really ever speak, they're watching. So what are some specific actions that you have taken that have allowed your staff to see that leadership and character in action?
Well, first and foremost, for me, it was even before I arrived, that there's been so many things that have taken place in the process of me becoming the principal of Auburn High School. We're blessed to have 5 assistant principals here as administrators, and 3 of them were candidates for the position just like myself. So how do you develop a relationship with them to overcome emotions and feelings over who is now the principal, who is not the principal? We still have to work together. We still have to show that we have a bond and relationship for the rest of the faculty. And so then when you come into the school and start the school year, teachers arrive back and they were worried about, well, how are they going to get along? Because I supported this person, I supported that one. And so those things were a little bit tough. The crazy thing about social media is by the time the teachers arrived, they knew more about me than I knew about myself. I had forgot some of the things they were telling me about. I was like, I forgot I even done that. So they had already researched me. They had already Googled me. So they had known a lot. And then but one thing I did do upon arrival over the summer, I asked for a yearbook from the year before, and I studied picture after picture, teacher after teacher. So when they were arriving back on campus and you're calling them by name and asking them how they're doing, that began to soften, some thoughts of, is this going to be a tense place, because they didn't know who I was. And so I'm just a large man, but I'm speaking to everybody. I'm high-fiving people. I'm asking them how they're doing. At one point, they were like, is he going to work? Because he seems too nice, but it wasn't that. It's just how you treat people, But then there's a time and place, and so then, we had the first assembly, and for me, we talked earlier about emotions. The sophomore class was our first assembly, and the sophomore class was larger than the student body at Springville High School. So I'm looking at more kids at one time than I had in an entire student body. But when you hit them with your expectations and the approach and how we're going to do things in a standard, that everybody began to understand, like, oh wow. So like this is like it's real. Like he is serious about how important it is to pour character into what we do. So like at Auburn, we have core values now. They're honesty, integrity, respect, and responsibility. But we also now have 4 pillars, and I created 4 pillars for our school. And we have academics, we have the arts, we have athletics, but then our 4th pillar is character. We have a pillar of character. So that's who we are. Our school is built on our 4 pillars. But if that character pillar is not a part of the other 3 pillars, the building won't sustain itself. It won't hold. So that we added those pillars, and it's on a display to where it says at the bottom, people are our foundation, being good people are our foundation, then our pillars, and then our core values. So I think putting that before people as a visual, and it's a daily conversation. Like, I'm serious about it. So, I'm convicted by it. And I've seen it change so many lives that I know that it's important.
It's cool too to hear you say really like you're living out what you believe in life and like living that out
Hmm.
through what your school is doing. And it's really neat to see that when you live that out every day, it is who you are. And so
Hmm.
you are like the walking advertisement, not really, but for what you're doing in your school, like you don't have to fake it because it's not fake, it's real. It's who you
Yeah,
are. And
Mhm.
that
yeah,
makes a huge
definitely.
difference.
Greg, I want to talk about listening because sometimes we underestimate how important and how strategic that listening really is. And so, when you got to Auburn, how intentional were you about listening? You mentioned it previously. Talk to us a little bit more about that, and how did what you heard shape some of your leadership decisions?
Listening is just so paramount. One thing that was so important was when people feel their voice is being heard, it just allows them to feel as if they belong. It doesn't mean they're going to get kind of the things in which they might be speaking about, but you took the time to listen, which makes them feel as if what they have to say matters and they're important to the success of the building. So it was very important. So I listened to a lot of people. I had a lot of conversations. I asked people of just different things about just how the school was functioning. Then also the crazy thing, if you listen long enough, you don't have to ask as many questions because
Mm-hmm.
you can learn just through listening. Like I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
to ask as many questions. Then also though you could listen to people speak and how they spoke to one another, and you learned a lot about people's personalities, and you learned like a lot about how people think and how they speak to each other. So those things were really, really valuable because I would listen to how someone else would speak to someone, but when I needed to have a conversation with them, I knew the tone and approach to take because I've heard them speak to someone else. So those things became very important to me. I think that is part of the listening aspect, especially when you're new. You're not coming in talking over people and speaking at them. I'm speaking to them. And then we're having conversations and discussions together. I'm not commanding anything. I'm just having conversations and allowing people to grow within themselves. A lot of times, if you're willing to listen and let people talk long enough, they'll answer their own question and then they'll convict themselves to be better because you've allowed them that space to hear it for themselves. You don't even have to tell them a growth area. They begin to realize growth areas just because you took time to let them talk through things. Sometimes it takes that. But when we cut people off or we act like we don't have time for them, how much have you hurt children? Because adults sometimes don't take it out on the principal, but they're upset or they're disappointed and they go in a classroom and they're not as efficient and effective as they would be when they feel they belong and they've been heard. So those things have been so important here, especially when you have 154 teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people want a lot of your time, and you make time for that. That's important. I hadn't taught a class in 19 years, so a lot of the teachers and the adults in this building are what helps our building move. Now I cast vision, and I go and speak and empower, and I'm the biggest cheerleader you can find in Auburn, Alabama. Like I'm cheering them on every day because I love what they're doing to help our children. But if I don't take time to listen to them and trust them and empower them to be the best educators they can be, then I'm hurting my children and hurting our school's success because I'm not taking enough time just to listen to someone.
That's so insightful. And it just really reinforces the fact that you think about leading people and not
Hmm.
programs. You have to know
Yes,
who the
ma'am.
people are. You have to listen to them. You have to give them the space, just like what you said. And you said when people feel heard, they feel like they belong. And that's what it's
Hmm.
all about. When you feel like you belong and you matter and you're important and the work that you do is important, then you're going to do a great job in the classroom.
Yes,
So,
yes. Hmm.
Greg, you've said before that student culture reflects adult culture. And we talk about that a lot on this podcast. In fact, that was the theme of last month's episode that character starts with the adults in the room. So when you stepped into Auburn, you've told us already how you began shaping adult culture, calling them
Hmm.
by name when they walked in the door, really listening. So, were there some early signals or small wins or moments that told you we're moving in the right direction?
I listened to Dr. Ashley Bowling, and she did an amazing job on this podcast. I sent her a message and told her how great it was. And I took some of those nuggets and came back to Auburn like, thank you, Dr. Bowling. Like this is valuable, you know. We learn from one another in this space. But you know, for me, just early wins were people accepting the fact that a new principal was here after Dr. Pignato had been here 11 years, and some of the people they had served with as assistants were still assistants. But they saw how when the assistant principal, the three of us, well, really four of us went to the class conference prior to school starting and spent time together and began to mend those fences and build relationships. So when teachers arrived back, like I mentioned earlier, they saw we were already fine. Everybody was good. And so that kind of opened and let them put walls down because sometimes they might treat me not disrespectfully, but they're a little bit distant because they want to make sure they're not offending a friend that they were supporting for the position. You
Sure.
know, so when all of those things began to see like, oh, they're okay, so we're all okay, and so then that began to kind of help us move forward. Then, you know, when we had our first meeting of PD, when teachers came back, the first day for teachers, we had a large assembly, but then we did breakout sessions, and I ran my own breakout session. So they came in about 15 apiece, and I just broke down kind of different things of what I've done in my journey, some things in which I feel we could do here, and just had open conversations and answered questions for them. And like I said, once again, they felt like they were a part of our school family. When you have a school this large, you can't just cast an email or an announcement and make everybody feel valued and heard. You're going to have to go
Mm-hmm.
and have some conversations with people. And I think just having those conversations, like we just talked about in the last question, listening to people. I mean, you never know how important a good morning to an adult is. Well, I appreciate what you do. Like
Mm-hmm.
those small wins. You want to talk about a small win? See an adult smile at you in the morning when they come in the building. You just had a win because that person is in a good space to start the school day to help children. You know, that's the main thing. What I feel I'm here to do is to help adults in our adult culture help children be
Mm-hmm.
successful. We can't do that if we're not in a space where we're all feeling like we belong and we matter to where we can go make an impact and make a difference.
And I hear you say that you really do, and you can tell just by listening to you and watching you at all the places that you've been, really that you are very intentional about creating connection with
Hmm.
your people, with the
Yeah.
people who work with you and work at your school. And there's a little vulnerability in that too. I hear you say,
Hmm.
you know, you had to tell them who you are and your story. And I think that's a lesson for all of us that there is vulnerability and intentionality in leading.
So we've established Auburn is significantly larger than Springville. You know, I recently stepped away from being the principal at Hoover to care for my parents. And so I completely understand being in a school that's really large. You have bigger staff, bigger student body, more complexity, something always going on. It's 24/7 school life. How has leading a larger school stretched you as a leader? How has it refined your leadership? Has it refined your leadership in new ways? Talk to us about that. I'm sure our listeners want to hear.
I tell you, you just don't really understand the amount of people that you become a part of leading when you step into something like this. You know, I tell people often that, you know, my 8 years in Springville were unbelievable, but you felt led to see if you could lead a larger school or see if you could have an opportunity to see if how you felt in being compelled with character and leading people could be done on a larger at a larger school. Then I tell people be careful what you pray for because you go from 700 to 2200 in them. Oh, this is what you want, but he'll give you overflow. So I'm living in the overflow right now. But I tell you what, you know, it stretches you because there's more people to touch and impact. There's
Mm-hmm.
more lives to impact. So, and when you have a set amount of people that's observing you and wanting to be influenced and impacted, now that's tripled. So how can you impact more people and be stretched? You know, like I tell people, like, you know, our hallways are long, there's a lot of movement, a lot of walking, just to be visible and seen. So how do you balance your day to where you're visible? And sometimes children don't want to have to talk to you. They just want to see your face. You know, and it's amazing at Auburn High School how we're 10 through 12. We don't even have freshmen. And
Mm-hmm.
11th and 12th graders wave at you like fourth and fifth graders. They just happy to see you. Good morning. How you doing? So, you know, this has really stretched you to just know that it takes a little bit extra effort now to have the impact that you want to have on the majority of all of the people in your building, all your stakeholders in your school community. You're not just a set person that I'm only doing athletics or I'm only doing the arts or I'm only going to a service or I'm going to it all. And it just requires more. But it has refined me because you have to realize in a space this large, you can't do it. You can't touch it all. So trust and empowerment is so huge with your leadership team. And I'm not just saying admin team, your leadership team. You know, you have teacher leaders, you have counselors, you have support personnel as well as assistant principals. You know, you tell people, I trust you till I can't trust you because trust is huge. I can't make every decision. If one organization waits on me to make a decision, I'm on the other side doing some other things, it's on hold, and it can't be. So we have to make a call. We have to make a decision. I have to trust the things in which we're doing. So, you know, I feel like I can't be an expert of it all, but I need to be knowledgeable of it all just so I'm aware of what's taking place. And it's almost like you're just managing. Like, I got to go get briefed on this. Let me get briefed on this one. Let me get briefed. Where are we on this one? You know, Jennifer, it's how I was at Hoover. Hey, can I get a little bit of this info? Where are we on this one? How are we doing? Do you need anything? You know, and I tell you what, though, when you go to look at someone and say, do you need anything? Are we good? And they say, well, we're fine. So you know what? I trust you. And I know you're going to do a good job with it. I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, they leave excited because they know that, you know, they're doing things well and you appreciate what they're doing. Plus, you're giving them leadership opportunities to grow to where they're ready for their opportunity when it comes.
I tell you, I love the energy that you have when you talk about it. You can tell that you love it. You love it and you make the time. And it's hard work, but you're doing it. I mean, you're finding the ways to touch the lives of all the people that are there in your school. Sometimes it's going to be a personal touch, and sometimes you're going to touch kids through the teachers. You're going to have to, you know, spread your goodwill, your good vibes, everything through the teachers, and it'll spill over to the kids. But you are casting your vision. You're doing a great job. We're so proud of you. And I love you sharing that about what's happening in your school. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, Greg, many of our listeners are early in their character journey. Some of them are stepping into new schools. Some are trying to rebuild a culture that has had where trust has been strained. And honestly, as you know, it can feel overwhelming at times. So based on your experience starting over, what's the first step you would take to encourage a leader?
I mean, first and foremost, like I'm a big self-reflection person, a begin with end type person. I'm just a big believer in you can't rebuild something and move something because they're going to look at you first as the leader. If you're not convicted by it yourself and want to change the culture by setting the tone, being daily consistent in what you're wanting to accomplish, it's going to be hard to rebuild a culture, you know, or even establish a cultural identity when you arrive. You have to be convicted within yourself of what you want to accomplish and be willing to remain consistent enough to deal with the tough days. Every day is not going to go great. Every day is not going to be easy. And there are going to be days when it's never feel like it's a win. And it feels like you're not moving or growing. But those are those days to where if you can fight through the tough days, better days are ahead. You just have to be willing to be consistent to work through the hard parts. I mean, here at Auburn early on, being a good person and having that expectation, it wasn't easy for me. And there were days when I was like, what have I done? Because it was not easy, you know, and children, they were not meeting that standard. But the more you expect it day after day after day, you know, like they say, Rome wasn't built overnight, you know, like it's going to take some time for you to rebuild or establish a culture or identity for what you want to establish and have in your building. And that comes with hard work. I call it sweat on the brow. You know, how does it happen? It's called work. You got to be willing to work every day and go in convicted and confident that we're going to move this thing in the right direction. And I'm committed to it. You know, I'm convicted and I'm committed. So, you know, that's what I would kind of tell that person. For me, I tell people I'm the most observed person on this campus. And they don't have to talk to me to watch how I carry myself, how I speak to people, how I do things. You want to build culture, just treat everybody the right way and do things the right way because they're watching. But if you're doing it every day on a daily basis, it's like it becomes habit. It's like we don't know anything else to do because that's all we do. That's all he does. And that's what he expects every day. And I'm not going to change from that for anything. And I think that's part of what I would encourage, you know, someone early in their journey to do is believe in what you want to accomplish, believe in your vision, and then like lean into it and don't allow anything to cause you to stray away from. There's going to be naysayers. There's going to be outliers. It's just part of it. But if you can just continue to stay convicted and committed to it and continue to win people, it will begin to be so successful. It's been amazing to see how things are beginning to shift at Auburn High School from August to where we are now in late February. Early on, I was like, oh my goodness. And now I'm like, hey, we have a chance.
I love it. I love that piece about consistency. I mean, there's not more to say, like just exclamation point to everything you just said, but that consistency piece when it gets hard and you don't feel like the day is won is really, really, really good. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm. And all three of us are former athletes. And I think about the last time that we talked on the episode, Greg, in 2023, and we talked a little bit about you being a basketball player and coaching, and all three of us have coached. And I think that's a lot of where our knowledge about the importance of consistency comes from, that knowing how important practice is and being consistent. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we've got to be consistent. Okay, so let's close with this. Let's say there's a principal listening right now. Maybe they're driving home after a long day, maybe feeling the weight of leadership, and they're either stepping into a new school or trying to rebuild the culture where they are. What words of encouragement would you give them? What would you want them to know?
I think if you're stepping into it and you want to rebuild it, I think one thing that I would encourage them to do is don't try to come in and change it by doing things brand new. Embrace the traditions. The traditions of the building matter. Find something within the building that you can utilize that's been a tradition that maybe it's just a little dormant or maybe it just hasn't been used in a while. But revive a tradition, revive a culture that was there long ago, especially if you want to embrace some of the community members who graduated from the school or part of the alumni. When they say, oh, they're bringing that back or they're reutilize, oh, yes, because we don't want the traditions in this school to die. We want to build on traditions. What do we have in place that we can use, that we can take and just bring it more to life, bring it back, revitalize it, because we want to embrace the culture that was already established. Wherever you are that need a new culture or a new identity, it just needs to be reshaped, refined from those traditional aspects that are already there. Springville High School, we found the Tiger Code. It was already there. We just revitalized it. At Auburn High School, they had an honor code that was in the student handbook that nobody's ever even said the words before. So you know what we did? We just started using the honor code. This is what we're going to talk about now because it's already here. We've been blessed that we had a student draw a tiger eye background for a poster. We had our library media aide come up with an acronym for our honor code to utilize, and they're in every classroom at Auburn High School, in every room at Auburn High School. Our honor code is posted. But you know what? That was nothing that I've created brand new. It was something already within the school that we just wasn't utilizing. So in two places, I've been able to find something that was a tradition or might not have been utilized, but it was created by someone in that building. And then one thing you want to do is give credit where credit is due. If someone has created something that we're going to revitalize, let's give that person the credit. It doesn't even matter if they're not even in the building anymore. I thank Donna Robertson at Auburn, at Springville High School, because she wrote that Tiger Code 15, 16 years ago, but it's something that has really transformed a building that was already there. Miss Beth Antoine, who's here as assistant principal, she was assistant principal of the year last year for the state. She created that honor code, but it's something that she had already had in place. We just wasn't utilizing it. So everything like we talked about earlier, even programs or curriculums of character or anything, if it's there but it's not living, it's not working. So we have to bring things to life. It's almost, sometimes I just sat here, Jennifer, laughing because I thought about Night at the Museum, the movie, where the animals come to life at night. we just got to be able to bring it to life and let it live, and it has to live in us, though. Has to live in us. Yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. You said two things: embrace the traditions and give credit where credit is due. So if we have some principals that are listening to this and they're new at their role, or they're just starting out building a culture of character, those are the two words of advice from Dr. Moore. So thank you for that.
And Greg, if we have listeners who want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They my Twitter X handle, serve more 52. You can reach me on Instagram at Gregory Moore 52. My Facebook page is Gregory Moore Jr. My dad has one, so so we had to go from senior and junior to do that as well. But you can email me too at gdmoore at auburnschools.org. Can reach me there as well. But I would be happy to connect and have a conversation with anyone. Be willing to help.
Awesome. We'll be sure to include that information in the show notes for all of our listeners. And to all of our listeners, if this conversation resonated with you, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram and connect with us at @coc.podcast. Just let us know what stood out or what character work looks like in your school. And be sure to check out our previous episodes because you'll find conversations with educators, leaders, community members, all centered on building cultures of character. And Greg, I want to thank you for your leadership and for modeling what it looks like to lead with character, not just when things are comfortable, but when you're starting over. And listeners, if you're still with us, you've made it to the end. And for that, we thank you. So until next time, keep building character in your community, one decision, one relationship, one conversation at a time.